Okay, we continue discussing the strategies which are applicable for restoring healthy immune system, which encompasses autoimmune diseases, as we told, and also cases of allergy, and in general, weak or exhausted immune system, which leads to higher risk of infectious diseases and also higher risk of oncological or cancer diseases. And we did discuss the case of a strategy addressing inflammation, local inflammation in intestine, and how to reduce it through changes of lifestyle and nutrition. But if you remember, we talked that there are 4 drivers to defects or disease of immune system: the dysbiosis, inflammation, local in intestine, lazy gut, and leaky gut. That we call the DILL problem, D-I-L-L. And we told that there are 4 strategies with which we should address those 4 main problems in parallel so that the front line will move forward. We should repopulate the microbiome, we should reduce the inflammation, we should rouse the lazy gut, and we should repair the leaky gut. So last time we were speaking about reducing the local inflammation in the intestine, and right now we will address the interesting and very common and popular topic of leaky gut and what to do about that. First of all, I should tell that the leaky gut terminology, it's actually not accepted by medical community in general, because it's not accepted as a separate disease or separate case, but still in medical community it is discussed that it is pathologically increased permeability of intestine, which is pretty much like leaky gut in lay terms. And it is well known that it is the main driver of several diseases, like celiac disease, if you heard about it. It's one of the drivers of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, which affects intestinal stomach, intestines, and it is known to be one of factors in most of autoimmune diseases. So what is happening and what is leaky gut about? So because we will use this terminology just for brevity, but under it I mean not only increased permeability, I mean unhealthy epithelium of intestine in general, because unhealthy epithelium in general, what happens in many diseases, it's not only about gaps opening between cells and something enters the blood. It is a bigger problem because unhealthy epithelium means that absorption of nutrients does not go the correct way. That malabsorption may cause many other diseases. It is actually well known that the condition of leaky gut is connected not only with autoimmune diseases or allergies, it is connected to many diseases or conditions of digestive systems, like from diarrhea and constipation to bloating and gases and malabsorption, as I mentioned. It actually does affect the hormonal system, and it leads in the hormonal disbalances and all consequences of that, or hormones problems, mostly in females, interestingly. It does affect even mental health, and certain cases of chronic fatigue or depression are connected to leaky gut, and such thing as gut-brain connection is discussed, and there are many publications about that already in medicine. And it does affect also such thing as fibromyalgia. Very common also problem in Western world. It is connected to leaky gut, it is known, and such thing as let me see, the skin conditions like acne and rosacea, eczema, etc. It is also well known that it can be connected to leaky gut. So you see, it's a broad spectrum of problems which is related to unhealthy epithelium of intestine. Now, regarding epithelium of intestine, it's a pretty interesting place because you know, when a person dies, the first cells in a human body which die, like if it is like the person is dead biologically, but different cells in our body die with different speed. Like nails are known to continue growing for hours, sometimes even more than a day after the death. Like we know that brain dies pretty quickly, but actually much faster than brain cells die the cells of epithelium in intestine. It's a very fragile part of our body. They are standing as a guard between pretty dirty environment inside the gut and your internal system, like blood flow and all tissues of your body. And that hedge is just one layer of cells thick. Just one layer of cells. It's a very fragile system, we can tell, and the fragility actually is even manifested in the very high speed of turnover in those cells. Those cells do not live long. They live between 2 to 5 days only. So every week you have new gut. If we don't talk about muscles, but we talk only about epithelium, what is inside, the lining, every 5 days, from 2 to 5 days, like 3-4 days, they die and they renovate, like new cells are being developed. That is a continuous process during all your life. Not surprising, things can go wrong. And not surprising, when things go wrong, the epithelium, it has very important functions. First of all, it separates what is inside gut from what is not inside gut, but what is inside your body. Second, it acts as not just a passive filter, but it is an active process of absorbing nutrients. It acts also as a process of digesting what needs to be digested. It acts also as an organ which controls your microbiome, all the bacteria which live inside the gut. And if the guards are not working properly, those who are under control will go crazy. That's what happens to dysbiosis. So unhealthy epithelium, so we talk about the problems of leaky gut is in general unhealthy epithelium, right? And here, let me touch for one moment the problem of malabsorption, because even if you do not suffer from problems of immune system like allergy, autoimmune problems, etc., the malabsorption problem is very common, and one of very usual example of it is anemia. Did you hear about anemia? Like low hemoglobin, it happens quite frequently, and it's often patched by just like take more iron, take more B12 vitamin, or take more folic acid and some supplements. But the question is, why does it happen that, for example, my body doesn't have enough iron, for example? I mean, if another person who lives in the same family with me eats the same food, like how is it like I and you eat the same food, you have enough iron in your body, I do not. Like why? So it's definitely not only about the how much iron is in the plate. It's also about how well you absorb it inside your body. Here is an example of malabsorption, which happens when the epithelium of intestine is unhealthy. And people with autoimmune diseases, why I touched anemia? Because first of all, it's one of the very common examples of malabsorption, very easy to diagnose, very easy to find, and like many people are aware that they have it. There are many other kinds of malabsorption where people may be not so aware about it. Another thing is that people with autoimmune diseases, they often have anemia. And the reason is, first, we just mentioned, unhealthy epithelium even in the intestine, malabsorption, not absorbing well the nutrients. Another reason is that they often have like unhealthy intestine, may have even lesions or small ulcers, and it can be bleeding. Very little bit, but continuously bleeding, like drop by drop, like losing blood like every day. Of course, it will lead to some kind of anemia. And another thing, that people with autoimmune diseases all frequently get some medication which does affect producing of blood cells, like methotrexate, azathioprine. Not something what we can do with it right away. Of course, If it is prescribed by your doctor, we should not remove it. But we're trying to build the foundation of a healthy immune system, of restoring it to norm, so that gradually you can decrease the amount of medication you get, and gradually your doctor will notice that you are good enough, probably even to get off it. So that's the eventual target for us, but like it is a gradual process. It should be done under observation of doctor. But yes, we know that all the medication which is administered for people with autoimmune diseases is very detrimental to some other factors in health, and it is better to build the foundation of healthy immune system and gradually get off it. So that is the eventual target. So now let us speak about the problem of leaky gut. We discussed it previously, and let me remind you that the cells in the gut, the cells which line the gut, if you imagine like a wall of bricks, and those bricks are connected to each other so that no large molecules can pass from gut to blood, and vice versa. The problem is that the cells connected with each other with certain proteins of tight coupling between cells, and that may suffer because of certain reasons which we'll cover now. And when they get disconnected, the large molecules which are not digested yet inside the gut, because we eat large protein molecules like in our food, should be digested into small Lego pieces, let us tell so, the amino acids, which will be actively absorbed by healthy epithelium into blood and used to build your own protein molecules. Now, the digestion is a certain chemical reaction which takes time. Until it is finished, it's not broken yet into small individual amino acids. It's still large pieces of large macromolecules of protein, which, if there is a breach, and there happen to be many breaches in case of leaky gut, in this wall, those big molecules will enter inside the blood flow, and they trigger immune reaction, because our leukocytes, our lymphocytes do react to such large molecules. They don't react to small amino acids. The small Lego pieces do not trigger immune reaction, but with the large protein molecules, it causes immune reaction, it causes inflammation, it causes inflammation inside the intestine, and it exhausts the immune system in general. That's how leaky gut may lead to inflammation. On another side, leaky gut creates, as we told, the epithelium of intestine is controlling the microbiome inside the intestine. If that epithelium, the guards, are not functioning properly, there is no decent control of the microbiome, and it goes crazy, and it leads to dysbiosis. So we told that all those four factors in DIL system which we discussed, they are interconnected, and there are many vicious circles between them. So we just talked about inflammation. The leaking causes the inflammation, but because the inflammation happens, the epithelium is not healthy, it's kind of weak, because there is constant inflammation there, it is damaged, and if it is damaged, it becomes more leaky, and more is leaking into the blood, so it's a vicious circle. Fixing it, first, we showed controls inflammation, reducing inflammation, which we discussed. Dysbiosis we will address later. It's a very big topic. Right now, we will talk about factors which do cause the leaky gut problem in general. Mostly, it's about our food. What is causing leaky gut in food? And probably number one, which if you read about the topic, you know about gluten, right? What is gluten? You heard such thing as gluten intolerance, right? It's a gray area, because gluten has a certain effect on your epithelium, on your intestine. But for most people, it doesn't cause problem. For some people, it does. Why does it happen? What is it in general? Gluten is actually a protein. It's a protein, very condensed nutrition and energy substance in our food. That is a protein which is synthesized in many grains, mostly wheat or barley or rye. It is synthesized to store a certain amount of nutrients. So that protein should be normally digested, absorbed, and used as all other proteins. But it has an interesting side effect. Even in healthy people, it is noticed that gluten does somehow irritate the epithelium of intestine, creating that leaky gut condition temporary for several hours. So it kind of leads to some disconnection between the junction of cells of epithelium, making those gaps or breaches between them, but it lasts usually from 2 to 4 hours in healthy people, and then it fixes by itself. So that can be okay if your intestine in general is healthy, if your microbiome is healthy. Microbiome will help the fixing, and if those 2-4 hours you do not eat something containing gluten again. In that case, you allow enough time to restore and to fix the problem. What happens, unfortunately, if people eat too frequently, so while these 2-4 hours didn't pass yet, if you eat something with gluten again, you cause it again. So the healing or the fixing of the temporary problem is not there yet, and it's again leaky gut condition, and again it's going non-stop. On another side, if the microbiome is not healthy, the fixing of the temporary effect of gluten may take longer than 4 hours. It can go for days. Definitely you'll eat something again. So fixing microbiome is extremely important. But if you have that problem with autoimmune diseases, right now, probably it is important to go very strict about diet and removing sources of gluten and replacing them with something which doesn't contain gluten. Again, gluten is not like enemy, but if you have a healthy system in general, you can keep it under control. If it's not healthy in general, you temporarily remove it. If you remember, in our 4+1R system, we had all those strategies, and at the end we can reintroduce what we strictly removed during the process of healing. After you healed, you can reintroduce it again. In my example, that's how it was. I was not eating anything with gluten, I believe, for a couple years, and then finally I realized that, yeah, I am capable now, and I can take now that bread or something with gluten, I can eat, no problem. Because I fixed everything there, the leaky gut is fixed, there is no inflammation, the microbiome is healthy, everything is healthy, now it's fine. So, the sources of gluten in our food are wheat, barley, rye. You see, those are all kinds of grains which are very related to each other, botanically speaking. And there are many different kinds of wheat, actually, like spelt and kamut. There is couscous, which is also made of wheat flour. Oats, it's interesting. Originally, oats are gluten-free, but people did play with oats, genetically modifying them so much that there are now some variants, some cultivars, some cultivated variants of oats which are with gluten, and some variants which are without gluten. So you may, if you are able to identify with what kind of oats it is, then fine. If you cannot identify, be suspicious. Probably, most probably, it is with gluten. Interesting is soy sauce. Who would think? Yes, soy sauce. Why? Well, because the process of preparation of soy sauce actually includes grain also. That's why soy sauce almost always has gluten in it. And people who are with celiac disease or any other gluten intolerance should stay away from it. Yes?
Is it true that our food supply now has more gluten, or the products, these types of grains, have more gluten than they did 20 or years ago?
It is believed so because of certain genetic modifications which we constantly do for all our grains. Yeah, it does lead to change of chemical composition, including increase of gluten. Yeah. There are still plenty of grains which are biologically gluten-free. I mentioned that some kinds of oats are gluten-free, and on another side, rice is gluten-free. It's well known, and millet or sorghum or buckwheat, actually, I highly recommend. Buckwheat is extremely rich in many nutrients, is gluten-free. Quinoa, also extremely rich in many nutrients. Quinoa is gluten-free. So there's still plenty of things with which you can replace corn, by the way, also. Yeah, so corn, I cannot tell that it's rich in many nutrients at all. It's pretty much starch, but yeah, but it's also free of gluten. So there are certain things with which you can replace. Of course, when we will discuss about microbiome, we will talk about removing and reducing starch. That's why right now, even going slightly ahead, I want to emphasize the importance probably of replacing grain with other products which can in many cases replace them, but they contain less of starch and more of other nutrients like protein and fiber, etc. And mostly these are different legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, so they can be used to replace it. And different seeds like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, different kinds of quinoa, by the way, is also seed biologically speaking. It's not grain, and also and nuts. Also nuts. So those things should be probably used by people who want to address that leaky gut problem to mitigate the problem of gluten. Another component in our food which is well known to cause the leaky gut problem are saturated fats. You know that the fats which are considered saturated and unsaturated. Yes, the big deal, probably like people usually know about it. And it is well known that saturated fats, and these are mostly fats which are solid or almost solid at room temperature, ranging from coconut oil and to almost all animal fats, yes, like lard, butter, etc. I cannot tell that they are inherently bad, but they are known to aggravate the problem of leaky gut. So, again, later you can reintroduce, but during the period of healing, when you are in active healing period, you should replace it with unsaturated fat, oils. They are not fats already, oils, because they are liquid during at room temperature. And even unsaturated oils, which are almost all vegetable oils plus fish oil, they are also, you can tell, come in two different varieties. Those which are more rich with omega-3 acids and those which are more rich with omega-6 acids. Our body needs both, but our body needs a proportion of more of omega-3 and less of omega-6. It is interestingly found that omega-6 also for leaky gut is not good. Omega-3 is better. That's why let us also, the main oils which you are using probably should be olive oil, walnut oil or other nuts oil, if you flaxseed oil, and fish oil. Those are the oils which are the richest in omega-3, and they are known to improve the condition of epithelium of intestine. Omega-6 oils, which, as I told, we consume usually too much of them, and these are mostly safflower oil, canola oil, corn oil, they're mostly, and sunflower oil. They're mostly omega-6, so reducing their quantity will be beneficial. Usually, if you eat something cooked, it's usually canola oil or safflower oil because it's kind of cheaper. Yeah, but olive oil and flaxseed oil probably should be the main player of what you use in your kitchen if you address a problem of intestine health. And in general, it's not only intestinal health, it's also health of heart and blood vessel system. Also, it's well known that we usually lack omega-3 oils in our food. We have more omega-6 and saturated fats. So this change regarding fats. Another factor is alcohol. And over here, I don't probably need to tell anything. As people who follow biblical principles for last times, you do not consume alcohol, but now you have one more reason why not to. Another thing which does aggravate the problem of leaky gut and can even cause more serious problems are certain kinds of medication. And here comes the problem of autoimmune diseases in general requiring some kind of anti-inflammatory medication. And those anti-inflammatory medication, most cases are administered so-called NSAIDs, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, which include such bestsellers as ibuprofen. Yeah, ibuprofen is considered a pretty reasonably safe medication given even to little children, but continuous usage of it is one of factors of risk of intestinal health. And now, like aspirin, also bestseller. Nowadays, usually we don't use it for autoimmune diseases, but can be used for other cases. So be careful about that. This is diclofenac, meloxicam. I'm telling certain names. Probably if you are a person who has autoimmune diseases, you recognize some of those names, or there are certain kind of other drugs which are in the same category, in the same classification. Almost all those NSAIDs drugs are known to damage somehow epithelium of intestine. Unfortunately, having autoimmune disease, you cannot get off that medication tomorrow. You cannot do it because you have inflammation, and that's what your doctor prescribed you to do. That's why, as I tell, we need to move forward all factors which we describe, the microbiome, the leaky gut, lazy gut, inflammation inside the intestine, everything through change of lifestyle, so that gradually we reduce the amount of the medication and gradually we get off it. Because just getting off it right away will not work, because there are many problems with why this medication was prescribed. The medication is not prescribed by doctor because it's delicious, it's prescribed for some reason. Another factor which is very important, and that is fully under your control, but it is kind of cultural thing. Insufficient chewing of food is well known to be damaging of intestine. The point is that it's not only about mechanically grounding your food. It's not only about kind of the digestion process which goes, but it's also because the saliva, it does contain so-called epithelium growth factor. Epithelium growth factor, you can tell it is a hormone, or it's not really a hormone, but it's a substance which is produced by our salival glands. It is inside saliva, and it stimulates regrowth and regeneration of epithelium wherever it goes. Where animals have wounds and they lick their wounds, it's not only about cleansing the wound, it's also the saliva actually acts to help healing process. You can do it with your wounds on your fingers and hands probably, but natural way, you always do it for your stomach and intestine, because the saliva which goes with your food into your stomach and intestine helps the regeneration process over there. The problem with modern culture of fast food being even faster and eating and chewing even faster because you have some work to do and you have places to go leads to us often not chewing it properly, which leads to not enough of epithelium growth factor delivered to your intestine where it is needed. Yes, intestinal cells, they also produce such factor, but they still heavily depend on additional one which comes from with saliva. And if it doesn't come in enough quantity, it's bad. So chewing properly all kinds of food, even if that food kind of doesn't require mechanical chewing, if it is a smoothie or something liquidish. Here comes the point. When people eat liquid food, not enough chewing actually is already proven to be not good for ulcers of stomach, for example, or ulcers in duodenum. That's why World Health Organization once it had publications that soups or like liquid food is not advised for people with ulcers because of that, because no chewing, no saliva, no that healing effect. It can be addressed by still, even if you eat liquid food, but still to have something else to chew, something else additionally, which you chew very well and pay attention to it, because you need more saliva. So that is one of factors which is important to addressing leaky gut. Now, weird it may sound, because it's happening here, but it does help over there. And by the way, semi-liquid food, things like smoothie, if it is very bad inflammation process in intestine, like Crohn's disease, etc. Sometimes it's the only kind of food a person can eat, like smoothies or some kind of nutritious mixtures which are liquidish, because anything else irritates and damages intestine badly if there are already ulcers. But in that case, still pay attention to chewing it very well, because the saliva is needed. So, taking that, another factor is, do you remember we were telling that the regeneration of intestinal epithelium is continuously going process. Even if gluten damages it, several hours takes to restore. Any other food also is kind of a stress for epithelium, especially if that epithelium is not very healthy already. So it is important to give enough time for restoration. And the problem again is too frequent meals or the snacking culture. Like every time when you snack, it's just like one more meal for your intestine, because again the food comes, all those digestive juices comes there, and all that work, and it is a stress for epithelium. So taking care about paying attention about how many times a day you eat and trying to reduce it, it's better to eat bigger meals but less frequently, giving enough of time between meals for restoration. For adult people, twice a day is good. For a very old people, like elderly people, even once a day can be good. So because the older we become, the longer time it takes for regeneration. In small children, regeneration goes very fast. Everything with wounds or broken bones, it heals very quickly. When people get older, it takes a longer time. The same with intestinal epithelium. That's why the older we become, the more periods of restoration between meals should be. And pay attention, like anything, there is no such thing as snack biologically speaking. Everything you eat requires your stomach and intestine to work. So it does not, it gets in the way of that restoration period of time. Twice a day, probably for adult people, is the ideal schedule, which allows enough of time for restoration. So snacking or too frequent meals is a problem. And here comes also a topic of fasting, water fasting, or elementary diet, so-called, which is almost like fasting, which we'll address another time, probably. It's a big topic, but taking a bigger period of time of hunger where nothing but water comes is helpful for restoring the leaky gut problem. Intermittent fasting, fortunately now, became very popular thing, and it does help a lot. Though even with autoimmune diseases, it does help a lot, even though it addresses only that one problem. Mostly. It doesn't address many other factors, but it still has very good effect. So if you include intermittent fasting with everything else what we discuss about, the effect will be much better. Besides that, okay, now we talk about how we damage it, yes, or how we don't allow it to heal well. Now we come to the point how the healing goes, or natural restoration of epithelium every time goes, and what do we need for the gut epithelium to not be leaky, to be healthy. We talked about leakiness is just one of problems. There are other problems. The unhealthy epithelium does not absorb the nutrients well. Yes, another problem. So pretty much epithelium needs energy, nutrients, and time. Regarding time, we told. The time is needed because that's why you make more time between your meals. What about energy? Most of the energy of intestinal epithelium comes from so-called short-chain fatty acids. The number one is butyrate, and butyrate is actually responsible for 70% of all energy of your intestinal epithelium. And it is not usually in your food. It is produced by bacteria which lives inside your intestine. So your intestine is mostly fed, the epithelium is mostly fed by bacteria which lives there. Regarding bacteria, we will talk later. But that bacteria, in order to produce the short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs, mostly butyrate, for energy for epithelium, that bacteria needs special kind of food. And that special kind of food is fiber. Fiber, mostly soluble fiber, and so-called resistant starch. If you heard those names, we will now list the products, what does contain it. That is important. So even though you don't really digest and absorb fiber for yourself, it's not for feeding your body, indirectly it is, because that fiber feeds the bacteria inside the gut, and the gut bacteria feeding on fiber releases that fatty acids which feed your epithelium of intestine. That's why lack of fiber will lead your intestinal epithelium literally to starve without energy, because the bacteria doesn't produce enough of it. Another factor which is needed for that bacteria, so that bacteria which feeds on fiber, it needs some kind of acid, mostly acetate or lactate acid, in order to produce the butyrate for energy for epithelium. The acetate and lactate acids are usually, if you have a healthy microbiome, it is produced also by the other kind of bacteria in intestine, but you can help it, and especially if the microbiome in your case is not very healthy, you can help it by adding some into your plate. Acetate, obviously, it is vinegar. So it looks like very old types of adding vinegar to salad. That makes pure sense, because salad contains vegetables, meaning fiber, and adding acetate to it helps the bacteria inside the intestine to digest that fiber well and feed your epithelium. So vinegar, yes. And now lactate, I told, another kind of acid which can be helpful, and in that case it is what? Sour milk. Yes, lactate or pickles, any kind of pickles contain lactate. So those things in your plate with salad, with other meals, and fiber. So you see now the picture of how eating is done, and it looks very like Mediterranean diet or paleo diet. It doesn't eat. So like some vegetables with fiber and something acidic like vinegar or yogurt, like plain yogurt, something like that in your meal. That is helpful for intestinal epithelium. And as you heal and improve your microbiome, by the way, that will be better and better, because on the same amount of fiber, healthy microbiome can produce more of butyrate. More of butyrate, more energy for your epithelium. So that process will improve as you improve the nutrition here and as you improve the microbiome also. Another source of food for that bacteria, which will eventually lead to production of butyrate to feed your epithelium, is resistant starch. And resistant starch is a kind of starch, you know, the starch is like what? It's carbohydrates, it's carbs in your food which you digest, and it gets absorbed into your body. Okay, resistant starch is a kind of starch which is not easily digestible. It's not easily digestible. It doesn't really feed much you, because it's not really digested and absorbed into your body. But not easily digestible for you, it leaves it more as a food substrate for bacteria inside the intestine. So it goes more through your small intestine, a longer way, and feeds those bacteria. So that resistant starch is important for healthy microbiome, and as we told, feeding on it, bacteria will produce a butyrate which is needed, which is necessary for healthy epithelium. Now, in your handouts, by the way, you can see this list of foods which is important for, let us tell so, the resistant starch, most of starchy foods do not have lots of it. Like rice, for example, what we told, yes, all kinds of grains, they have very little amount of it. The most of it you can get from beans, lentils, chickpeas. Again, interesting is some starchy products may have more of it if after being cooked they are placed into refrigerator and stored in cold place for some period of time, and in that case the amount of resistant starch there grows. Another important source of resistant starch can be oats raw. Again, often in America oats are eaten cooked somehow in boiling water. In that case, all resistant starch is destroyed and becomes readily available for you to digest. But if it is raw, and both rolled or cut, still cut oats can be eaten raw if they're just like mixed with some yogurt or something. And in that case, those oats contains not only nutrients for you, but in that case they still continue containing the resistant starch, which is originally them to feed the microbiome. So raw oats is a component not of oatmeal, the British and American style oatmeal, but of muesli, which is Swiss style. It actually was, they started eating it in Switzerland in raw. So that thing is useful. Another source of resistant starch are bananas and plantains, mostly green bananas and plantains. They contain resistant starch. And again, as I told, beans, lentils, chickpeas, they are always source in your food which will deliver enough amount of it. Regarding fiber also comes kind of in two different types of it. There is a soluble fiber and non-soluble or more hard fiber. And regarding the hard fiber, we'll talk more later when we'll discuss the problem of lazy gut. But the soluble fiber is that kind of fiber which is helpful for bacteria to produce butyrates. That's exactly our target, to feed with energy our intestinal epithelium. And soluble fiber is still, it's in almost all kinds of vegetables and in fruits, more even in fruits. Pectin, one of examples of it, is well known to be in high quantity in apples and in all citrus fruits. Dried fruits also contains, and then by the way, we will discuss later about all not good things about sweets in general, like sugar and sweets, etc., that it should be removed. We already talked about it when we talked about inflammation. So if you still have some cravings for sweets, dry fruits is a good replacement for it. It probably satisfies the crave for sweets, and it also is healthy, and it feeds a good microbiome, and it is anti-inflammatory, etc. Flax seeds and chia seeds are good source of soluble fiber, and it's also good source, by the way, of omega-3 fatty acids, which we discussed are also important for reducing inflammation and helping with leaky gut problem. So flax seeds ground or somehow cooked can be added, and chia seeds actually they even don't need cooking pretty much. They can be added to almost all food. We talked about acetate and lactate. Again, adding it is helpful, but as you fix your microbiome, even necessity of it becomes negligible because a healthy microbiome produces enough of it. There are several other things which may help with delivering more nutrients for intestinal epithelium, improving its health. One of them is sulfur, and sulfur is known to be a component of many amino acids which are heavily used by intestinal epithelium. It's actually used everywhere in the body, but intestinal epithelium, as we discussed, because of very a rapid rate of turnover of cells, because cells live literally like 2-5 days. It's probably the shortest living cells in our body. The only competitors will be some leukocytes, which also live a couple of days. Very short living cells. So they require continuous supply of certain nutrients, amino acids, including sulfur is important. And sulfur is coming from different kinds of brassicas. Brassicas are cabbage, kale, mustard leaves, many leafy vegetables, and including cabbages and all that family. Onions and garlic also contains, and sulfur is important because it's needed for that amino acid synthesis. And on another side, another amino acid which is very important is glutamine. Glutamine is probably the #1 by quantity amino acids which is needed in our body. It can be synthesized inside our body, but it is frequent, it's often that we cannot synthesize enough of it, and supplying more in food is important. And in that case, nuts is a main supply if you are vegetarian, and if you are not vegetarian, nuts and legumes of different kinds if you are vegetarian. If you are not vegetarian, then pretty much fish and meat also contains enough of it. Glutamine is well known to be also in some kinds of vegetables like cabbage, mostly red cabbage, and beets contains a good supply of it. Quercetin. That is, quercetin is one of compounds which is category of riboflavins, and it is contained in most fruits which are very colorful. So here comes different kinds of berries, and also in onion, garlic, and some leafy vegetables. The quercetin, there are relatively recently publications about importance of quercetin for health of intestinal epithelium. But it looks like including different kinds of berries in food and fruits of bright colors, mostly like reddish, orange, etc. Because quercetin, just like all flavonoids, it gives more color to food where it is. It is beneficial for health of intestinal epithelium. At the end, I want to mention 2 other products which can be used as an active stimulation of regeneration of epithelium. One of them is flaxseed, which I already mentioned, and flaxseed is well known to help for that, even with ulcers and stomach ulcers, etc. In that case, flaxseed, it can be ground flaxseed added to food. It can be added with boiled water, and it becomes like such. It's not like jelly, but sounds like mess, but it is known to help the healing process. And another product is a sea buckwheat, sea buckthorn. Sea buckthorn is not very usual in America, no. It's more known in Eurasia, but nowadays you can buy it online, pretty much everything. And it's very popular in China and in Russia. And actually, in China, there was a research which was showing that sea buckthorn are berries. They're yellowish in color, they're very sour, and oil of those berries is well known to make like miracles about healing of epithelium, including skin, throat, intestine, and stomach, what we now talk about. It is used in gynecology also for healing. So that oil, there was study in China, what I was mentioning, about damage of intestine in radiation. And high radioactivity can bring havoc to body in general, including intestinal epithelium. And it was shown that the sea buckthorn oil is extremely helpful and restores the regeneration process of intestine. So oil of sea buckthorn or those berries can be taken as supplement even, which will help on restoring the health of intestine. I think we are almost done for today, and we can continue. Yes, please.
Just, you keep talking about all the things that you can do to improve your leaky gut or your intestine. How do you know how bad your intestine is? Is it just by you either do or don't have autoimmune, or is there another way to tell?
Okay. There are analyses which are done in laboratory, but I don't think that those analyses you can just go and make it, because they're not used in clinical practice much. They're more scientific. But if you have some kind of autoimmune disease, and if you have malabsorption, for example, like eating well but still having anemia, etc., it's most probably unhealthy epithelium of intestine. Yeah, autoimmune diseases, it is guaranteed that you have an unhealthy epithelium of intestine. That's why, applying those things is good. I can tell that in general, these principles, even if you are healthy, I mean, those principles will help to continue being healthy, because as we age, as I told, the process of regeneration of epithelium slows down and it becomes more and more vulnerable. So as we age, it becomes more and more important to mitigate that problem.
Now, is there something that you could ask your physician to run tests, just to give you an idea of where on the spectrum you are, or do you just really look at what should be the ideal versus where I'm at and already know that you're off?
Okay, that's exactly what I tell. There are no such tests in clinical practice which diagnose leaky gut. There are certain tests which are done in science, but we don't use it for patients in hospitals or outpatient. But in science, yes, there are certain substances that they add to your food, you eat it, it shouldn't be absorbed to blood, we know, and then we check in your blood or in your urine, and if we find it, then when they say, oh, that leaked through intestine. There are such things, but they don't use it in clinical laboratory diagnostics for patients. So
the short and sweet of it is really just to start making the healthy choices.
In general, yes.
Push towards the most optimum level that you can, regardless of where you might be. Just look for that optimal.
Exactly, because all those things which we are describing now, like, of course, probably you don't need, if you don't have those problems, you don't need to order online the sick buckthorn and take that oil. Probably you don't need it, but all other things about like consuming the fiber, soluble fiber, resistant starch, etc., those are, and omega-3 oils, and removing or reducing saturated fat, and paying attention about gluten. Probably if you don't have problems, you don't need to run away from bread, but again, like, pay attention. Okay, you ate bread now, like probably 3 hours later you shouldn't eat it again. You should, if you want to eat, you eat something else which doesn't have gluten. So kind of balancing it, it makes pure sense, because it just, if you are healthy, we are very glad for you, like, continue being healthy, try not to stress your epithelium too much. Yep.
Pediatrician test years ago, she had this thing where they did a test, like on Monday you ate nothing but dairy, ice cream, cottage cheese, all that. She said it takes 4 days for food group to leave, but you try how you feel that day, and then next time, like the Brussels sprouts, kale, all that, you see how you feel. Is that a way to find out if you have leaky gut or something?
What you describe is the elimination diet, so-called. We discussed this last time. When you start with a couple products, you eat them for several days, you observe, you feel good, then you add one more product, eat it several days, and you see, if you feel good again, you are good with that. You can add one more and again continue. If you feel bad, you understand, that is a red flag. That product, you have a immune reaction against. Then you roll back, you probably take 1 day of hunger, that's what I used to do, or you can take several more days of eating what is safe, and then you introduce another product. So that's a back and forward how you can find what you have immune reaction sensibility against and mark with red flag those products which you should avoid because you have immune reaction against it. And as you remember, we were telling that there's food panels which can do that work for you for several $100s, saving you probably several weeks or months. But I was also describing that that is very temporary thing, because if you have problem of leaky gut, lazy gut, dysbacteriosis, etc. in your intestine, you're removing certain foods will temporarily remove the inflammation, but leaky gut is still in place, dysbiosis is still in place. You eventually, after several years, get sensitive to some other foods which you previously were not sensitive. So this is temporary solution, this is a patchy solution, good to apply, but you need to fix all other factors so that the inflammation does not return back. So in order to avoid inflammation returning back, you should fix the other factors also. But elimination diet is one of things, yes, to reduce and remove inflammation while you are fixing other dimension of health, of